This video is made for entertainment purposes only. I found the camp at dawn. What was left of it, anyway? The tents were shredded, canvas hanging in strips like flesh from bone. 2 ATVs overturned, engines torn open, oil pooling black in the dirt. And the trees. God, the trees. Claw marks 8 feet high, bark stripped away in violent gouges. Blood smeared across the trunks. Not human blood. Something else. A message written in a language older than words. I stood there in the cold morning light, breath fogging, hands shaking. And I knew they had done this. The clan. My clan. After 40 years of silence, they had broken their own rule. For me. My name is Edward Hartwell. I'm 73 years old. I've lived alone in these woods since 1983, in a cabin I built with my late wife before the cancer took her. We had plans, Margaret and I. Retire early, live off-grid, grow old watching the seasons turn in the Cascade Mountains. She got 6 months here. I got 40 years. People ask why I stayed. Why I didn't move back to Seattle, closer to our sun, to civilization. I tell them the truth, just not all of it. I stayed because I wasn't alone. The first time I saw evidence of them was October of '83. I'd been widowed 4 months. The grief was a physical thing, a weight pressing down on my chest every morning. I spent my days chopping wood, tending the garden, talking to Margaret's ghost. At night, I'd hear sounds, branches snapping, something large moving through the underbrush. Bears, I thought. Elk. The forest reclaiming the silence. Then I started noticing the footprints. Massive. Humanoid. Barefoot impressions in the mud near the creek, each one 18 inches long, 5 toes splayed wide. Stride length over 6 feet. I'm a rational man. I considered explanations. Hoax. Misidentification. My own grief-shattered mind playing tricks. But the prints kept appearing. And the food started disappearing. I had a small garden, tomatoes, squash, green beans. I'd harvest in the evening, leave surplus in baskets on the back porch. By morning, the baskets would be empty. No raccoon could carry a 20-pound pumpkin. No deer could unlatch the porch gate. So I tested a theory. One night in November, I left a bushel of apples at the tree line, 50 yards from the cabin. I watched from the window, lights off, moon bright enough to see. At 2 a.m., they came. 3 figures emerged from the forest. Massive, 8 to 9 feet tall, broad-shouldered, covered in dark fur that absorbed the moonlight. They moved with eerie grace, silent despite their size. The largest, I would come to know him as the Alpha, approached the basket first. He knelt, lifted an apple, turned it over in enormous hands. 5 fingers, opposable thumbs. He bit into it, chewed slowly, then made a sound. Low, rumbling, almost pleased. The others came forward. A female, slightly smaller, and a juvenile, maybe 6 feet tall. They gathered the apples, divided them, ate in silence. When they finished, the Alpha looked directly at my window. Eye contact across the darkness. He couldn't possibly see me. Could he? He raised one hand. Palm out. Not a wave. A gesture. Acknowledgement. Then they melted back into the forest. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, Margaret's old rifle across my lap, trying to reconcile what I'd seen with everything I thought I knew about the world. By sunrise, I'd made a decision. If they wanted food, I'd give them food. But we'd have rules. The arrangement took shape slowly, over months, then years. Every 3 days, I'd leave produce at the tree line. Apples, carrots, potatoes, whatever I could grow or buy on my monthly trips to town. I never spoke. Never approached. Never tried to photograph them. In return, they never came closer than 50 yards from the cabin. It was a truce. A border agreement between 2 species who had no common language except respect. I learned their patterns. They came at night, usually between midnight and 3 a.m. More frequently in winter, when food was scarce. Less in summer, when the forest provided. I learned to distinguish individuals by size, By gait, by the sounds they made. The alpha, silver-streaked fur across his shoulders, a deep scar down his left arm. The female, his mate, I assumed, gentler, quicker. The juveniles, growing over the years, eventually bringing their own young. I named none of them. Names felt like possession, and they weren't mine to possess. But I watched them. I learned them. And slowly, inexplicably, they became my family. The loneliness I'd carried since Margaret's death began to ease. Not because they filled the void, nothing could, but because I was part of something. A secret older than roads, deeper than grief. Every time I left food and found it gone, every time I glimpsed a shadow moving through the trees, I felt connected. Needed. Years passed. The world changed. Cell phones became common, then internet, then smartphones. Hikers ventured deeper into the Cascades. Logging companies pushed closer. But my corner of the forest remained untouched, protected by remoteness and the clan's discretion. I was 68 when I saw the alpha up close for the second time. It was winter 2018. Heavy snow had collapsed part of my woodshed. I was trying to clear it, working too hard, and my heart started skipping beats. I dropped to my knees in the snow, vision blurring, breath coming in gasps. I heard him before I saw him. Footsteps. Crunching snow. I looked up. The alpha stood 15 feet away, closer than he'd ever come. He was enormous, 9.5 feet tall, easily 600 pounds. His face was almost human. Brow heavy, eyes deep-set, amber-colored. Intelligent. Concerned. He took one step forward. I raised a hand. Stop. He froze. We stared at each other. My heart steadied. His chest rose and fell, breath-fogging. Then he did something I'll never forget. He reached down, picked up a piece of firewood, and placed it gently on the porch. Then another. And another. He rebuilt part of the pile, moving with surprising delicacy, never coming closer. When he finished, he looked at me. Waiting. "Thank you," I whispered. He made a sound. Low, soft, almost like a hum. Then he turned and walked back into the forest. I sat in the snow for an hour afterward, crying. Not from fear. From gratitude. From the overwhelming knowledge that I'd been seen. Truly seen. By something the world insisted didn't exist. That was 7 years ago. And until 3 weeks ago, that was as close as we ever got. Spring came late this year. Snow lingered into April, then melted fast, turning the forest floor into mud. I was preparing the garden for planting when I noticed the first signs. Boot prints. Not mine. Fresh, deep treads, military style. Leading east, toward the creek. Then ATV tracks. 2 vehicles, wide tires, cutting through the undergrowth. My stomach dropped. I followed the tracks for a mile, moving carefully, staying quiet. The forest felt wrong. Too silent. Birds absent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I found their camp in a clearing near the ridge. 2 large tents, expensive gear, 3 men sitting around a propane stove. Rifles leaning against trees. And worse, traps. Steel snares hung from branches, cruel and oversized. Bait stations with rotting meat. Trail cameras zip-tied to trunks. Poachers. They were hunting big game. Illegally. And they were deep in clan territory. I stepped into the clearing. 3 faces turned toward me. Mid-30s to early 40s, unshaven, wearing camo. The largest one, shaved head, neck tattoo, grinned. "Well, look at this. Grizzly Adams." "This is private land," I said, voice steady despite the fear rising in my chest. "You're trespassing. Private." He stood, walked toward me. 6'2", 220, all swagger. Funny. Didn't see any fences. Didn't see any no trespassing signs. They're posted at the road. "We didn't come from the road, old-timer." He stopped 5 feet away, close enough to intimidate. We're here for a week. Maybe 2. Hunting. You got a problem with that? Call the sheriff. Oh wait. He made a show of pulling out his phone. No service. Guess you're out of luck. The other 2 laughed. Leave, I said quietly. Now. Before you do something you'll regret. His smile faded. That a threat? A warning? He stepped closer. I could smell tobacco and sweat. Let me give you a warning, old man. We paid good money for coordinates to this area. Somebody said there's big game here. Real big. So we're gonna hunt, and you're gonna mind your own goddamn business. Understand? I held his gaze. Didn't flinch. You have no idea what you're doing. Yeah. He leaned in. Enlighten me. I wanted to tell him. Wanted to scream that he was setting traps for something that would rip him apart without a second thought. But I couldn't. The secret was all I had. All they had. Just leave, I said. Please. He shoved me. Not hard enough to knock me down, but enough to send me stumbling. Get the fuck out of here before I make you. I left. But my hands shook the entire walk back. That night, I didn't leave food. It was the first time in 40 years I'd broken the routine. But I couldn't risk it. Couldn't lead the clan toward those traps, those guns, those men who saw them as trophies instead of people. I sat on the porch in the dark, rifle across my lap, listening. The forest had changed. The usual sounds, owls, crickets, the distant rush of the creek, were gone. Replaced by something else. Movement. Branches snapping. Low vocalizations, guttural and cautious. They knew. The clan always knew when something was wrong. At 1 a.m., I heard it. A sound I'd only heard once before, years ago, when a wildfire threatened the area. A deep, resonant call, rising from somewhere in the valley. The Alpha. It wasn't distress. It was communication. Coordination. And it was getting closer. I went inside, locked the door, and prayed that the men in the clearing had enough sense to pack up and leave. But I knew they wouldn't. Men like that never do. I didn't sleep. Every sound pulled me to the window. Wind scraping branches, a fox screaming in the distance, the creak of the cabin settling. But beneath it all, I felt something else. A presence. Multiple presences, moving through the forest like currents in deep water. By dawn, the silence was absolute. I made coffee, hands still unsteady, and stepped onto the porch. The food I hadn't left sat in its basket by the door. Untouched. Accusatory. Then I saw them. Footprints. Massive, fresh, pressed deep into the mud. Not at the tree line where they usually appeared. On my porch. 4 distinct prints, each one 18 inches long, leading from the forest to my door, then back again. They'd come closer than ever before. Close enough to touch the walls. And they'd left something. A branch, thick as my wrist, snapped cleanly in half and placed across the doorstep. Deliberate. A message. We know. And we're watching. My chest tightened. In 40 years, they'd never breached the boundary. Never crossed that invisible line we'd established. But the rules had changed. The poachers had changed everything. I grabbed my coat and followed the boot prints east. The forest felt wrong. Birds silent. Squirrels absent. Even the trees seemed to lean inward, branches clawing at the sky like broken fingers. I moved carefully, stepping on rocks and logs to avoid leaving tracks. A half-mile in, I found the first trap. A snare. Steel cable, military grade, looped around a low branch and anchored to a tree trunk. The loop was massive, 4 feet in diameter. Designed for something big. The bait below was a deer carcass, already bloating, covered in flies. I felt sick. They weren't hunting deer. They were hunting them. I pulled the knife from my belt and cut the cable. It snapped with a metallic twang, coiling like a snake. I kicked the bait into the underbrush, then moved to the next trap. 3 more in the next 100 yards. I dismantled them all, working quickly, glancing over my shoulder. The forest pressed in, watching. I was cutting the fourth snare when I heard the ATV engine roar, growing louder. I dropped into a crouch behind a fallen log as the vehicle burst through the trees. 2 men, shaved head and a skinnier one with a red beard. They stopped 10 feet away, engines idling. "The fuck are you doing?" Shaved head dismounted, saw the cut cable in my hand. His face darkened. "You've gotta be kidding me." "These traps are illegal," I said, standing slowly. "And cruel." "Illegal." He laughed, sharp and mean. "Lady, I mean old man, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no law out here. Just you and us. Leave." Before what?" He stepped closer. Red beard circled right, flanking me. "Before you call the cops? Before your imaginary forest friends come save you?" My heart hammered. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "Oh, I think I do." He pulled a photo from his pocket, shoved it in my face. A blurry image, blown up and pixelated, a massive, upright figure in the trees. "We paid 15 grand for these coordinates. Local tracker said he'd seen sign. Big prints. Territorial behavior. We're gonna bag one, sell the body, and retire. So unless you want to end up as collateral damage, I suggest you get back to your little cabin and forget you ever saw us." "They'll kill you," I whispered. "They?" He grinned. "You mean the fairy tales? The big bad monsters?" He leaned in, breath hot and rancid. "Old man, I've hunted grizzlies in Alaska, lions in Tanzania, wolves in Siberia. Whatever's out here, it bleeds. And if it bleeds, I can kill it." He shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backward, tripped over the log, hit the ground. Pain shot through my hip. Redbeard laughed. "Stay down, Grandpa." They mounted the ATVs and roared off, leaving me in the dirt. I limped back to the cabin, hips screaming, hands scraped raw. The sun was high now, but the forest remained dark, shadows pooling beneath the canopy. I wanted to call someone. The sheriff, a ranger, anyone. But my satellite phone had died 2 years ago, and I'd never replaced it. The nearest town was 40 miles by logging road. I had no car. No way to get help. I was alone. Except I wasn't. That night, I sat on the porch, rifle loaded, watching the tree line. The food basket sat beside me. An offering. An apology. I didn't know if they'd accept it. At midnight, the forest came alive. Not with sound, with movement. Shadows detached from trees, flowed across the ground like liquid. 6, maybe 8 figures, massive and silent, converging from all directions. I saw the alpha first. He emerged from the north, silver fur glinting faintly in the starlight. Beside him, the female, his mate, sleeker, quicker. Behind them others. Younger, but no less massive. A family. A clan. They moved toward the poachers' camp. And I followed. I stayed 100 yards back, pulse racing, legs shaking. The clan moved like ghosts. No sound, no broken branches, no disturbed earth. They flowed through the forest as if they were part of it, shadow and flesh inseparable. The camp came into view. Firelight flickered between the trees. I heard voices, laughter, clinking bottles. The men were drunk. The clan stopped at the edge of the clearing. The alpha raised one hand, a signal. The others spread out, surrounding the camp in a loose circle. Then the alpha stepped forward. He didn't hide, didn't crouch. He walked into the firelight, fully visible, 9.5 feet of muscle and fur and controlled fury. The laughter stopped. "What the fuck?" Shaved head scrambled for his rifle. The alpha moved. Faster than something that size had any right to move. He crossed the clearing in 3 strides, grabbed the rifle, and bent the barrel like it was made of plastic. The metal groaned, then snapped. He dropped the pieces at the man's feet. Shaved head fell backward, mouth open, no sound coming out. The other two ran for the ATVs. The clan was already there. A younger male, 7 feet, broad-chested, grabbed the first ATV and flipped it. 400 pounds of steel and engine overturned like a child's toy. He tore the handlebars off, ripped open the engine compartment, pulled wiring and metal free with bare hands. The second ATV met the same fate. Redbeard fired his rifle. Once. The shot echoed through the forest, deafening. The bullet hit a tree 6 inches from the Alpha's head. Bark exploded. The Alpha didn't flinch. He turned slowly, looked at Redbeard, and then he bellowed. The sound was primal. A roar that came from deep in his chest, resonated through the ground, shook the trees. I felt it in my bones, in my teeth, in the terrified animal part of my brain that remembered being prey. Redbeard dropped the rifle and ran. The clan didn't chase them. They didn't need to. They destroyed the camp instead. Tents shredded in seconds, canvas torn to ribbons. Gear scattered, stoves smashed, coolers crushed, supplies trampled into the mud. The traps, every single one, ripped from the trees and bent into unrecognizable shapes. The Alpha moved to the largest tree at the edge of the clearing. He raised both hands and dragged his claws down the bark. 8 parallel gouges, each one 4 inches deep, 8 feet high. Then he pressed his palm against the trunk, hard enough to leave a bloody print. Territory marked. Warning issued. The clan gathered around him. Silent. Waiting. He looked toward the forest. Toward me. I froze. I was hidden, 50 yards away, behind thick undergrowth. There was no way he could see me. But he knew I was there. He held my gaze for 3 heartbeats. Then he turned and led the clan back into the darkness. I waited until the forest was still. Then I walked into the clearing. The destruction was absolute. Fabric hung from branches like grotesque decorations. ATV parts scattered across the ground. Wheels, axles, shredded seats. The fire still burned, casting flickering light over the carnage. And the trees. God, the trees. Claw marks on every trunk. Blood, not human, something darker, smeared in long streaks. The message was clear. This is ours. Leave. I found one of the trail cameras, crushed but still recording. I pried out the SD card, pocketed it, and backed away. The poachers were gone. Their truck, parked a quarter-mile south, had fresh tire tracks leading back toward the main road. They'd fled. Wounded pride, maybe bruised bodies, but alive. The clan had let them live. But they'd made sure those men would never come back. I returned to the cabin as the sun rose. Exhausted. Terrified. Awed. I sat on the porch, the SD card heavy in my pocket, and stared at the tree line. At 7 a.m., he appeared. The Alpha. Standing at the boundary, 50 yards away, exactly where he'd always stood. But this time, he didn't retreat. He waited. I stood. Stepped off the porch. Walked slowly toward him. He didn't move. I stopped 10 feet away. Closer than I'd ever been. Close enough to see the silver streaking his muzzle, the scar tissue on his left arm, the intelligence burning in his amber eyes. "Thank you," I said. He tilted his head, studying me. Then he did something I'll never forget. He nodded. Once. Deliberate. And then he turned and walked back into the forest. The sheriff arrived 3 days later. I heard the truck before I saw it, diesel engine grinding up the logging road, struggling through ruts and mud. I was splitting wood when Deputy Marcus Halloway pulled into the clearing, followed by Sheriff Bill Garrett. 2 men in their 50s, local born and raised, carrying the weariness of people who'd seen too much and helped too little. Garrett got out first. Tall, gray-haired, face like weathered stone. Edward. Bill. I set down the axe. Wasn't expecting company. "Got a call," he said, walking over. 3 men came into town 4 days ago, filed a report. Said they were camping up in this area, got attacked by, well. He pulled out a notebook. Quote, "A pack of massive wild animals. 8 to 10 feet tall. walked on two legs, destroyed everything. I kept my face neutral. Sounds like they were drinking. That's what I thought. He studied me. But then I drove up to their campsite. Or what's left of it. You been out that way recently? Haven't had reason to. Aha. He flipped the notebook closed. Edward, those men were armed. Experienced hunters. And something scared them so bad they left 15 grand worth of gear behind and drove 90 miles an hour back to civilization. One of them had claw marks on his back. Deep. Needed stitches. Grizzly. I suggested. No grizzlies in this area. Not for 20 years. He stepped closer. What's going on, Edward? I met his eyes. Bill Garrett wasn't stupid. He'd grown up hunting these woods. He knew the stories. Every kid in the Cascades did. Bigfoot. Sasquatch. The local legends passed down through generations of loggers and trappers and indigenous tribes. But knowing stories and believing them were different things. I don't know what those men saw, I said carefully. But they were poaching. Illegal traps. No permits. Maybe whatever they encountered was protecting its territory. Protecting. He chewed on the word. Edward, the camp looked like a war zone. ATVs torn apart. Tree trunks clawed to hell. Blood that, he hesitated. Blood that didn't match any species in the database. Then maybe they brought something with them. Exotic game. Something they weren't supposed to have. Silence stretched between us. Marcus shifted uncomfortably by the truck. Finally, Garrett sighed. Look, those men were assholes. I ran their records, priors for illegal hunting, trespassing, firearms violations. Part of me is glad something sent them packing. But if there's a dangerous animal out here, I need to know. For everyone's safety. There's no danger, I said. Not unless people go looking for trouble. He held my gaze. Then nodded slowly. All right. But if anything else happens, anything unusual, you call me. I don't care if you have to hike to town. Understood. Understood. He and Marcus got back in the truck. Before starting the engine, Garrett leaned out the window. Edward, those men said something else. Said an old man confronted them, told them to leave before they regretted it. That wouldn't be you, would it? I smiled. I might have crossed paths with some trespassers. Gave them a piece of my mind. Thought so. He shook his head. You be careful. Not everyone out here is as forgiving as me. They drove away, dust trailing behind them. I stood in the clearing until the sound of the engine faded. Then I went inside, locked the door, and let myself shake. That night, I restarted the ritual. The basket of food sat by the back door. Apples, carrots, potatoes, squash. I carried it to the tree line, set it down, and stepped back. I'm sorry, I said to the darkness. I should have warned you sooner. Should have found a way. I didn't want to lead them to you. The forest was silent. I turned to leave, then stopped. Something lay on the ground where the basket had been. I knelt. A wildflower. Delicate, purple, already wilting. It hadn't been there a moment ago. I picked it up, throat tight, and looked toward the trees. Thank you, I whispered. The darkness didn't answer. But I felt them. Watching. Listening. I went back to the cabin, placed the flower in a glass of water, and cried for the first time in months. The weeks that followed were quiet. The food disappeared every 3 days, like clockwork. No more boundary violations. No more close encounters. The clan had retreated to their old patterns, and so had I. But something had changed. For 40 years, our arrangement had been transactional. I provided food. They maintained distance. A cold peace, built on mutual avoidance. Now it felt different. Personal. Like we'd crossed a threshold together and couldn't uncross it. I started leaving other things with the food. Blankets, scavenged from thrift stores on my monthly supply runs. Tarps, useful for shelter. Once, a first aid kit, though I doubted they'd use it. The items always disappeared. And sometimes, I'd find things in return. A bundle of firewood, neatly stacked by my shed. Stones arranged in a circle around my garden. Protection from deer. Once, a deer hide, tanned and clean, folded beside my door. We were communicating. Awkwardly, silently, but communicating. I thought about Margaret often during those weeks. What she would have made of all this. She'd been a teacher, endlessly curious about the natural world, patient with mysteries. If she'd known what lived in these forests, she would have been ecstatic. And terrified. And probably would have spent the rest of her life documenting them from a respectful distance. "I wish you were here," I told her memory one night, sitting on the porch. "You'd know what to do. How to protect them. How to keep the world from ruining this." But Margaret was gone, and the world was closing in. The letter arrived in June. I'd driven into town for supplies, stopped at the post office out of habit. Most of my mail was junk, catalogs, charity solicitations, the occasional note from my son in Portland. But this envelope was different. Official. Law firm letterhead. I opened it in the truck. "Dear Mr. Hartwell, we represent Cascade Timber Holdings, LLC. This letter is to inform you that CTH has acquired logging rights to a 5,000-acre tract adjacent to your property, designated as Parcel 447B on the attached survey map. Logging operations are scheduled to commence September 1, 2024. We recognize that increased activity may impact your quality of life. However, all operations will be conducted in accordance with state and federal regulations." I stopped reading. The map showed the parcel clearly. It covered the valley to the east, the heart of clan territory. The place where I'd seen juveniles playing, where the alpha had led his family after the poacher attack. Their home. 5,000 acres. Clear-cutting. Bulldozers and chainsaws and crews of workers, descending on the forest like locusts. The clan would be displaced. Or worse, exposed. My hands shook. I drove home on autopilot, barely seeing the road. That night, I made a decision. I'd kept their secret for 40 years. Told no one. Not my son, not friends, not the occasional journalist who showed up asking about Bigfoot sightings in the area. Secrecy was survival. But silence wouldn't save them now. I went to the closet, pulled out a cardboard box I hadn't opened in decades. Inside, notebooks. Hundreds of pages, handwritten observations. Dates, times, behaviors. Sketches of footprints. Descriptions of vocalizations. 40 years of documentation, meticulous and hidden. I also had the SD card from the poacher's camera. I'd watched the footage once, late at night, alone. 60 seconds of shaky video. The alpha approaching, eyes glowing in the infrared. Reaching toward the lens. The moment before he crushed it, his face clear, undeniable, real. It was evidence. Proof. The kind that could change everything. Or destroy everything. I sat at the kitchen table, the card in one hand, notebooks in the other, and weighed my options. Option 1. Do nothing. Let the loggers come. Hope the clan moved deeper into the wilderness, away from roads and people and danger. Hope that hope was enough. Option 2. Go public. Release the footage, the journals. Prove they exist. Risk turning them into a spectacle, a commodity, a target for every hunter and scientist and government agency in the country. Option 3. Find a middle path. I thought about Margaret, about what she would do. And I picked up the phone. Dr. Robert and Gwynn ran the Pacific Northwest Conservation Alliance, a non-profit focused on endangered species and habitat protection. I'd met him years ago at a community meeting about logging restrictions. He was sharp, passionate, and, most importantly, discreet. I called his office, left a vague message. He called back within an hour. "Edward Hartwell," he said, voice warm. "It's been years. What can I do for you?" "I need your help," I said. And I need you to promise that what I tell you stays between us. No press. No publicity. Not yet. A pause. You have my word. I told him about the logging parcel. About the valley. About why it mattered. I didn't mention the clan. Not directly. But I sent him the notebooks, anonymously, through a P.O. box in another town. I included photographs of footprints, scat, territorial markings. Evidence of a previously undocumented large primate species inhabiting the area. No video. Not yet. That was my insurance policy. Robert worked fast. Within 2 weeks, he'd filed an emergency petition with the State Wildlife Commission, citing credible evidence of an endangered species. The logging company fought back, hired lawyers, demanded proof. Robert played it perfectly. He released just enough information to intrigue scientists without revealing specifics. Unidentified hominid, the report said. Possibly a relict population of Gigantopithecus or an unknown subspecies. The media picked it up. Not front-page news, but enough. Cryptozoologists descended on the area, setting up cameras and recording equipment. None of them found anything. The clan was too smart, too careful. But the publicity worked. The logging permit was suspended pending further environmental review. 6 months, maybe a year. Enough time for Robert to build a case for permanent protection. I watched it unfold from the cabin, relieved and terrified in equal measure. The secret was fraying, but the clan was safe. For now. Autumn came. The air turned cold, leaves blazed orange and gold, and the forest settled into the quiet hush before winter. I was on the porch one evening, watching the sunset, when I saw him. The alpha. Standing at the tree line. Not hiding. Just there. Beside him, 2 juveniles. Smaller, maybe 7 feet tall, curious and cautious. His grandchildren, I guessed. The next generation. I stood slowly. Walked toward them. Stopped at the boundary. The alpha watched me with those amber eyes. Ancient. Knowing. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. He raised one hand. Pressed his palm against a tree trunk. Held it there. Then he stepped back. And for the first time in 40 years, he nodded. Not a greeting. An acknowledgement. You kept your promise. And we kept ours. The juveniles followed him into the forest, shadows melting into shadows. I stood there until the stars came out, crying and smiling and feeling more at peace than I had since Margaret died. Epilogue. It's winter now. December. Snow covers the forest, muffling sound, turning the world into a cathedral of silence. The logging company dropped their appeal last week. Robert called to tell me, the parcel has been designated a protected wildlife corridor. No development. No extraction. The valley is safe. I don't know how many years I have left. 73 is old, but not ancient. My hip aches in the cold. My hands shake more than they used to. But I'm still here. Still leaving food every 3 days. Still keeping the secret. Yesterday, I found a letter tucked under a stone on the porch. Not from the clan, they don't write. From my son. Dad, I know you love it out there. But you're not getting any younger. Come stay with me this winter. Just for a few months. Please. I read it twice. Then set it aside. I can't leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because this isn't just my home. It's theirs. And someone needs to stand between them and the world that wants to turn them into myths or monsters or museum specimens. Last night, I sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, and watched the tree line. The alpha appeared. Older now, silver fur spreading across his chest. He didn't approach. Just stood there, breath fogging in the cold. We looked at each other across the darkness. 2 old souls, survivors of a world that had tried to erase us both. And I understood finally what Margaret had been trying to tell me all those years ago, in the months before she died. Loneliness isn't cured by people. Sometimes, it's cured by those who choose to see you, who acknowledge your existence without demanding that you change. The alpha turned and walked back into the forest. I finished my coffee, went inside, and locked the door. Tomorrow, I'll leave food at the tree line. Apples, carrots, potatoes. The same as always. And they'll take it. The same as always. A quiet arrangement. A secret older than roads. A promise kept.